Okay, we are in Chaf Amud Aleph 20a. We are the second half of the Mishnah. So the second half of the Mishnah continues with the Sotah proceeding. And then, in some way, tangentially, the Gemara made some social commentary that's quite interesting, and we could brag about some of this stuff. So let's see. We'll just give them a general outline as to what we're talking about, but the Gemara is going to discuss some of these things, and we'll get into able to brag about it a bit more once we get into the Gemara. That's to start. Good morning. Okay, so I actually had an epiphany this morning that I should probably buy a couple of copies. No, I haven't done that yet.
And what, of Sotah?
Yeah.
We have tons in the library, no?
Not really. It's always a struggle. So I'm going to buy a good one early next week, maybe this week, maybe on Friday, I'll have time. Okay, so we discussed the point at which the ink has been erased, and either she willingly drinks, or we pour it out, or we force her to drink, depending on what her reaction is. So now what happens when she drinks? So says the Gemara. It says the Mishnah, I'm sorry. The line begins. The line begins with the word Eina, and there's a small vav there. Eina maspekes lishtais, halfway through the Mishnah. You see it?
I see it, yeah.
Eina maspekes lishtais.
Small vav.
Oh, maybe not in that printed. No.
Oh.
It should be a new paragraph that says Eina maspekes lishtais in that version of the Gemara. Halfway through the Mishnah, you see a small little vav in the beginning of the line.
How many lines then?
Halfway through the Mishnah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first word in the line is Eina. There's a small vav there. The first word in the line, you see it?
Oh yeah, I see it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Eina maspekes lishtais. She doesn't even have a chance to drink it, meaning it barely starts to go in. In this case, someone asked yesterday about what happens if she regurgitates.
Right.
It seems here that the effect happens almost immediately.
Mm.
So I don't think there's any time for regurgitation.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't even have time to drink it. And just as it starts to go in,
Wow.
to the point, her face becomes green. They know boltais, and her eyes begin to bulge. Vihi mismalas, that's how they pronounce it, I think. Gidden. And she gets filled with, gidden means like literally like veins or like lines. So Rashi describes that the veins in her face start to bulge, and her entire body becomes kind of like these it becomes like these like grooves in the body where it's like bumpy. It seems like something like that, right? Where's Rashi? Yeah, her lines, her skin becomes full of, her flesh becomes full of lines that are like bulged. So this happens as he starts drinking. So
your veins start bulging.
So it says, yeah. And those presents begin to say, quickly take her out. She like to Tamna Azara, so that with her in her death, she should not render the courtyard impure.
Right.
Rashi tells us to put a pin in this because the Gemara is going to explain exactly which door she exits, how she exits, and why there is an issue of impurity when seemingly certain parts of the temple don't have that problem with impurity. So Rashi tells us to put a pin in that, and we're going to discuss that later. The famous Shar Nicanor, the gates of Nicanor. It seems it goes through Shar Nicanor. Right, where did she come in from? Did we say where she came in from?
I don't remember.
Right? No, it's Lishka. Anyway, it goes through Shar Nicanor, the famous Nicanor gates, right? Nicanor is that non-Jew donated gates, and it came from far land. And the whole story with the river, the whole story with the ocean, and the thing capsized, and the other side of the boat, the other door showed up, right? So the Gemara is going to tell us more about that door. And that's what she went out of. And the Gemara is going to discuss whether that's has been consecrated to the point that it's not allowed to become impure. So we're going to discuss that in the Gemara. But in the meantime, we know this. The Gemara tells us the people there would say, take her out. Let not the courtyard become impure.
Wouldn't isn't like all the shechita done there?
That's an animal death. That's not a human death.
Animal death doesn't bring on impurity?
Not the same type.
Isn't that the Layla animal death?
And the vela is not ritually slaughtered.
Oh, okay, right. Just like a regular guy.
Regular death, yeah.
Like a carcass is
Yeah.
considered impure.
That's right. That's right.
Of the same level?
No, different level.
Oh,
Different type of impurity to human corpse.
human corpse is the highest impurity
Yeah,
possible.
that's correct. Okay. And then more comments. If she has some sort of merit, it would literally suspend for her, meaning it would protect her for a certain amount of time. And the Gemara is going to discuss how long that is, different opinions, how long it lasts. Delayed effect, yes. The Gemara is going to discuss exactly how long that is. And the Gemara is actually going to, the Gemara is over there is going to give us more details, but here the Gemara tells us, the Mishnah tells us as follows. Yeshchos, there is a kind of merit, that would suspend her doom for a year. Yeshchos, there's the kind of merit, that would suspend the punishment, the doom for 2 years. Yeshchos, and there are such merits that will suspend for 3 years. The Gemara is going to discuss other levels, 3 months, 9 months. And sorry?
I'm saying that's interesting because of the way, I guess, with these merits and that.
It seems like she does get, right, we discussed this actually once in the previous Gemara,
Yeah.
that type, even if she dies later, the type of death is such that it indicates that she was guilty.
Yeah.
Right? So the Gemara is going to get to more details about that as well.
Does it mention, I guess, if there's any chance of tshuva there in the lake for her?
It's a good question. I don't remember if the Gemara discusses that, but I guess that would be, if, I don't know, I don't remember a discussion on whether tshuva helps in between that time. Certainly tshuva helps. Tshuva always helps in the sense that the
Maybe
person
not
now
in this life, maybe after,
that's right. Tshuva always helps in the sense that the person is no longer a wicked person. Whether he has to go through some punishment, or
Right.
if we want to give it a, if you want to give it like a Hasidic twist, not punishment, but cleansing, which is sometimes very painful, then a person might have to go through cleansing even after teshuvah, right? But teshuvah certainly is always a factor. The question is whether or not that would replace, whether the teshuvah will replace the cleansing. Separate question. That's an atonement issue, not a teshuvah issue, not a teshuvah issue, right? When we learned the laws of teshuvah, we described there's a distinction between teshuvah and atonement. Teshuvah is what I do. I return to Hashem. That's always available to me, no matter what happens. Atonement means, okay, God says, okay, you're atoned, and therefore no reason to do any other cleansing. That's right. So it is. That's right. So it is. That's right. So it is possible. So certainly teshuvah is a factor here. If she lives longer, she has more time to do teshuvah for sure. The question is only if there's atonement to the point that she doesn't have to go through the cleansing and go through this death. I don't know. I don't remember if the Gemara discusses it. I don't know. Okay. So now the Gemara gets, this helps us now segue into some social commentary from the Gemara. The social commentary has remains, I don't want to say contentious, but remains a matter of discussion amongst Jewish and Orthodox community till this very day. Chaf Mid Aleph, 20a. And we're almost the end of the Mishna, not the end of the page, end of the Mishnah. That's right. The law begins with the word Torah and a fourth word. Mikan. Yeah, so there is a kind of merit which suspends for 3 years. Now says the Gemara. Mikan Omer ben Azai. From this, Ben Azai derived. It should be noted that Ben Azai never married, and perhaps his personality plays into what he says here. Ben Azai never married, and Ben Azai said he didn't get married because Nafshi Chavshka Torah. My soul desires Torah. He was kind of saying that the way some people desire women is how he desires Torah. That's the degree of intensity. So he didn't need to get married. And ordinarily we say that a person should get married because, first of all, a person can't be alone, and the man and the sin that he'll engage in because he's not married doesn't offset the amount of time he may lose from learning Torah because he's married.
Right.
Moreover, the ultimate purpose for creation is to get married.
Right.
and to live a normal human life and sanctify that, as we learn in Chassidus and so on. But the halacha does say, especially with having children and so on, but there is the halacha which says if the person has the desire to the extent of Ben Azai to learn Torah, which means the desire is such that he won't engage in the kind of sin that exists because a person doesn't get married, because that's how intense his desire for Torah is. You understand which sin I'm referring to?
Yes.
Yes? Okay? Yeah. So Ben Azai had,
Before you even said it.
I'm trying to make sure we're on the same page. So Ben Azai had such an intense desire that he doesn't have this issue. So he was fully dedicated to Torah. And interestingly, he died. How did he die? Right, the famous story of Arba Nechnas Pardes, 4 people who entered into the orchard, entered some spiritual experience. Rabbi Kiva went in and came out unscathed. Another went in and came out and lost his way in his faith. Another went in, came out, seems like had some sort of breakdown in his mind. And the last one, Ben Azai, went in and didn't come out. Didn't come out, died. In ecstasy, his soul just expired from spiritual ecstasy. So this is further to his personality. He was so intensely engrossed in his spiritual growth. He literally died in his spiritual growth. His soul expired from his body in this kind of mystical experience. This is Ben Azai. So he's the one that's, sorry?
So that's like Aaron's sons, no?
Yeah, very similar. So actually, that's one of the reasons why he's called Ben Azai, even though his name, if I'm not mistaken, his name was Shimon. I'm not mistaken, but they don't call him by his first name because he didn't live long enough to be able to get smicha.
Oh, wow.
So, which means they wouldn't put the word Reb before him or Rabbi.
Right.
But they don't want to disrespect his high level, so they refrain from doing that just by saying Ben Azai. At least it's according to one opinion in the commentary on the Mishna Pirkei Avos. This is all from memory. If I'm not mistaken, when he's mentioned in Pirkei Avos, I think the commentary there gives this explanation. At any rate, so this Ben Azai, he says the following. Chayiv Adam Lilmud es Biter Torah. A person is obligated to teach his daughter Torah. He never got married, didn't have children. He's making the statement.
Bito is Aramaic?
No, Bat is his daughter,
Right.
and Bito is his daughter.
Okay.
Mishnah is always in Hebrew.
Right.
So Chayiv Adam Lilmud es Biter Torah. A person is obligated to teach his daughter Torah. Why is that? Because she imtishteh, if she drinks the water, because she learned Torah, that she will know that the merit is what's keeping her alive. And she won't come to doubt the value of the Sotah because she knows why she's not dying right away. Right? So, as the Gemara is going to tell us, we derive from the text of the Torah itself. So Rashi tells us that later the Gemara is going to tell us that from the text of the Sotah law itself, we derive that there's a possibility for merit to suspend the dune. So if she learns Torah, she'll know that. She'll know that there's a suspension of dune because of merit. And thus, when she doesn't die right away from drinking, she's not going to laugh off the whole thing because she knows there's some merit that's suspending it. Following? This is like a clever Ben Azai. Okay.
Sorry, I missed it. Can you say it again?
If she drinks the water and doesn't die,
right.
She say, this whole thing is bogus.
Right.
But if she's a learned woman, and she learned the laws of Sotah,
right.
And in the laws of Sotah, we derive from the text of the Torah itself, we derive that there's a possibility for suspending doom because of merit. The fact that she didn't die right away, she'll know the reason why I didn't die is because of my merit.
But
if she happens to become a Sotah later in life,
right.
And she drank the water, and she knows she's guilty, but instead of dying right away, she didn't die. She'll be like, why am I dying now?
Right.
But she'll know because she learned Torah, and she knows that the merit will suspend the death.
Right.
So she won't come to laugh at the Sotah water because she'll know that the reason why she's not dying is because of her merit.
I guess what's throwing me off is that it's the timeline. So this thing that's happening is predates is as post the writing of the laws of Sotah. Because I thought we derived.
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Like this story of Sotah, I thought this is a story in the Gemara. It's said in the Gemara times. No,
there's no story of Sotah. We're discussing the laws of Sotah.
Right, but this is like a piece of a Gadada, but with
no. Then as I is saying, as a law, teach your daughter Torah. Because if one day she becomes a Sotah and she drinks the water, she'll know why she didn't die.
Okay.
Because she has a merit. That's all. There's no actual story. It's Jewish law.
Okay.
What if
Yeah.
it's not a merit? What if it's just that the Sotah woman is innocent?
And she knows she's innocent and she won't die at all.
Yeah.
She'll get blessings.
Well, the Sotah woman herself knows whether or not she's guilty or not. She doesn't need.
But she doesn't know if she has
the
merits.
outcome of the
It
second
could
court.
it could be she knows she's guilty, and yet she's not dying. Why?
Okay, good. So you're saying that's because of the merits.
Some sort of other merit. But if she learned the Sotah law, she would know that the reason why she's not dying is because of merit. Because she knows she's guilty and she should have died.
Right.
Following? Okay. So different, but as I said,
So this is not-
teach your daughter Torah.
This is not for people, other outside women watching a woman.
It's for herself.
Just for herself.
First, or if she's watching, maybe she's a woman and she's
It would
watching.
work for other people because.
No, well,
they know
it's also possible. Okay,
she's innocent or-
well, let's go with other people also. Let's say this person's daughter never becomes a Sotah, but she watches somebody else become a Sotah,
Yeah.
and she watches somebody else drink the water, and she knows that woman is guilty,
Oh, okay.
and the woman doesn't. Let's just go that way. She knows she knows the woman's not guilty, is guilty, and she sees the woman drinking, and she sees the woman not dying. So she'll laugh it off and say, "Oh, the whole thing is bogus," and she'll go misbehave because the water's not going to affect her anyway. But if she knows that merit could suspend, so she says, "Oh, the reason why that woman's not dying is because she has a merit, even though I know she's guilty."
So it protects the integrity of the Sotah process.
By her knowing.
By her knowing, by learning Torah.
That's right. Following?
Doesn't.
Mary with me?
Yeah, I think so.
Doesn't
But
minimize the Sotah.
I think so.
What are we missing?
It's hard for me to repeat it then. Basically, so if the woman is there and she knows that person committed the adultery,
Yeah.
and she's about to see her watch her drink the water, that she's
Yeah.
like, that she's what getting her popcorn ready for the show.
All right.
And then okay, so then what's next?
The woman drinks the water and she doesn't die.
So then
So if she doesn't know if she doesn't know why the person's not dying, she goes off and says, "This whole thing is bogus. I can go misbehave. Nothing's going to happen to me."
right.
Yeah, but it has no effect.
But
Has no
there's-
effect.
But there's
But-
some other righteous reason.
Aha. But if she knew that, then she would say she would still know the Sotah water is effective,
Right,
but she would know, okay, she must have some merit.
right.
Good. So
And that's possibility?
that's what we just learned. That we just finished learning that merits can suspend it for a year, suspend it for 2 years,
Okay,
suspend it for 3 years, right?
Okay.
We just finished learning that.
Okay.
So if she learned the law of the Sotah, she would know this.
Okay.
And therefore, we protect the integrity of the Sotah by teaching our daughter's Torah. This is Ben Azai's value.
Okay.
Got it? So this is Ben Azai's argument.
Hmm.
Now, Rabbi Lezer says the opposite.
But you also, sorry, this is
Yeah.
very interesting. But it's also, there were women who have had to have witnessed women dying in this process.
It's possible.
Very scary.
It's very possible too, yeah.
Woman bulged by her.
It's very possible. I don't know how often the Sotahs would happen back in the day. I really don't know.
Yeah, maybe once a generation.
Exactly. So it's very possible. Women never saw it. That's right. It's very possible. That's right. It's very possible.
Rushed her out. That probably.
No, I mean,
But if she's not dying, they didn't rush her out, right?
Yeah,
They only rush her out because her eyes start bulging and her.
Women's courtyard probably waiting for the woman to come out,
Mhm.
but like you said, it was probably very rare event.
I don't imagine that the Sotah proceeding was very often.
Nothing deterrent.
Are there descriptions of people that are
Of a description of Sotah.
of like? is
Well,
there-
we had recently someone who said that he remembered that they gave a woman to drink twice. Remember we read that? So obviously this person saw at least 2 Sotahs from one woman,
Right.
right? Because
Is there a document of somebody who's guilty?
not that I'm aware of. I don't know. Not that I'm aware of. Anyway, so this has been Azai's view, to teach your daughter Torah, and that way she knows the reason why there's no effect from the Sotah waters is because this person has some sort of merit, and now she doesn't come to question the validity of the Sotah or the effectiveness of the Sotah water. Now, Rabbi Lezer, and this is the halacha, actually says the reverse. Rabbi Lezer says, "Kol hamalamed bitoy Torah." Anyone who teaches his daughter Torah, ki'ilu loimda tiflus. It's as if he is teaching her promiscuity.
What?
As the Gemara is going to explain. Because by adding to her wisdom and knowledge, she can find ways to scheme the system.
Exactly.
And Rabbi Lezer says, protect her against these kind of schemes by keeping her in the dark. And this is actually the halacha.
Right.
And this became the practice for many, many generations, and in some communities till this very day, that a person doesn't teach his daughter Torah. Many Orthodox communities, that's the case. I should note, just at this point, we'll talk about this more when we get to the Gemara later, when the Gemara discusses it. But I should note at this point that the reality of history is that Orthodox Jewish women were more educated than their non-Jewish counterparts, women. Because even a Jewish woman who, quote unquote, wasn't studying Torah was still taught to read Hebrew, to pray, and was still taught basic laws required for her to know. How does she keep a kosher home? How does she keep Shabbos? How does she keep the laws of marriage? These are of impurity, mikvah. These are very complex laws with lots and lots of details. So that alone gave these women a far greater education than their non-Jewish counterparts, who through most of history were completely ignorant. And on top of the mothers had to bake and serve their husbands. That's it. Right? The phenomenon of women equality is a very new phenomenon in which never mind the Jewish world, the secular world, in which the secular world decided that they need to educate women and women should be able to have jobs and so on and so forth. It didn't exist for most of history. But in most of history, Jewish women were far more educated than their non-Jewish counterparts because they need to know something, they need to read Hebrew. Most women, most people in the world throughout most of history were illiterate and innumerate, couldn't read and couldn't do basic math. But women could, even Jewish women could. That's correct. So even in these communities where they were following this law not to teach their daughters Torah, they had, for example, a siddur called the Korban Mincha, which translated the siddur into Yiddish, so that women can understand what they're reading when they're davening. It was a custom in many communities that when a husband and wife got engaged, the gift the husband would give to his wife is this siddur Korban Mincha, which is a siddur translated into Yiddish, for her to understand what she's praying. So that's already way far past what her non-Jewish women counterparts were doing. And there's also, for example, the Beis Yehuda. Beis Yehuda is a Chumash with Yiddish translation. And I'm sure the same thing existed in the countries where they spoke Ladino, like the Sephardic women. I'm sure the same thing exists. I don't know. My point is, and not, we have to put this into historical context. Oh my gosh, the Gemara says don't teach your daughters Torah. Calm down. Most women in history didn't learn anything. Right. And even in the community, even in this set of laws where we don't teach our daughter Torah, we taught more to our daughters than non-Jews were teaching to their daughters, just because by dint of history. Yeah.
And are we saying like up at a certain time up to a certain age, or this law? Oh. Okay.
So now, having said that, as a rule, not just specific age, as a rule. Okay. Having said that, we should also know that even if we say that one person is not supposed to teach a daughter Torah, one is obligated to teach a daughter Torah, as we just described, the laws that are required for her. And one could argue even further that there are many opinions that when a person learns Jewish law, it's not enough to understand or to know just the concluding law. But one is required to learn the background of that law and the logic that we use to deduce and derive at that law. Following? Yeah, following or no? It's very simple. Yeah. Either I tell you, here's how you put on tefillin, right, or I give you the whole background. The verse says this, right, and because the verse says that, we derive this, and this is how you put on tefillin, right? The back and forth, right? So there's a strong argument to be made.
Like you were talking about Rambam this morning.
That's right. So what?
Like you're saying about Rambam this morning, he just says the halacha and that's it.
That's right. Rambam says clear-cut law, right, whereas Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch is background to every law. Now, if we're going to go with the view that a person is supposed to learn not just the dry law, but the background to the law, and women now have to learn the laws that are required for their life, Shabbos, laws of impurity, laws of kosher, laws of prayer, and Yom Tif, and a whole host of other laws that they need to live as functioning Jews. And one is supposed to learn the background of the law. So you're talking about the majority of Gemara you teach your daughters. The whole tractate Shabbos, the background behind Shabbos, the whole tractate Kedushin, the whole tractate Gittin, the whole tractate Ksubis, the whole tractate Nida, whole tractate Chulin, or big part of Chulin, which talks about the laws of kosher. There's a huge swath, brachas.
Yeah.
Many laws and their backgrounds that if your daughter knew all of it, she'd be a scholar greater than me. Right. Not that I'm a great scholar, but I spent a number of years learning Torah, right, and I still don't know all the laws and all their backgrounds related to that women need to know.
Right.
Right. So even when you say you're not supposed to teach a daughter Torah, there's huge amounts that you're teaching them anyway.
Right.
Wait.
Okay.
Right. Because just the basics is a ton.
Exactly. Especially if you can do the backgrounds also. Yeah. What are you saying?
So You teach her the laws, but not the background to the laws?
No, I'm saying there are those that say that in general, a person has to know the laws of Torah.
Yeah.
That's a requirement. Yediyas Torah. What's that mitzvah? To know the laws of Torah. Is it just to know the conclusion of the laws, or is it also to know the background? This is a dispute, irrespective of men and women.
For men. Yeah.
For men too. Does a man have to know the background of every law he learns? Or does he only have to know the law? Right. So if you go with the opinion that you have to also know the background of the law, and you apply that to women, you just open the door to much more learning that a woman would have to do.
Right.
Even as you say, you shouldn't teach your daughter Torah. So then, if that's the case, what is the point of this law? What's the point of this law? It says, don't teach your daughter Torah. The point is, it would seem, that when it comes to, again, traditionalist education of men, there is the learning for the sake of learning, irrespective of what you're going to know or not going to know, whether it's practical, not relevant, intellectual pursuit, for the sake of intellectual pursuit. And that's an engagement in the study of Torah that a man is required to do as a mitzvah to study Torah, irrespective of what the conclusion of the law is going to be, just to engage your mind in the philosophy of God and the intelligence of divine Torah, irrespective of conclusion. Whereas when it comes to a woman, if you're going to follow this opinion of Rabbi Lezer, that a person shouldn't teach his daughter Torah, it means the learning is focused on what's relevant.
Right.
And beyond that, don't confuse her with all kinds of philosophical ideas. Don't confuse her with, because now you've just confused her. You've given her ways to scheme the system. Don't do that. Promiscuity is as Rabbi Lezer puts it.
So don't give her like all these different interpretations or different sources.
Yeah, and just
why the laws there are.
Not necessary. Even if you need background, just make Even if you are going to teach background, you teach it in such a way that's relevant. But anything beyond relevance, just intellectual pursuit for the sake of intellectual pursuit, avoid that. This is Rabbi Lezer, and this has been the way of Jewish education for many years. Now the Rebbe came along and took it upon his shoulders to change this.
Women shouldn't just know the laws that are relevant to them.
The Rebbe,
Yeah.
the Rebbe argued that women should be learning for the sake of learning.
Wow, just like
that. Yeah, and that made a very, very simple case. The whole basis of the law here is that if you teach her, you're going to give her the reasons to scheme the system and get her confused, let her stay focused on what she has to do, and that's the end of it. The Rebbe said, if you don't teach your daughter's Torah, you're going to have the opposite effect. Because today, everything's available.
Right.
And if you don't teach her, she's going to Google it.
Right.
And who's to tell you if she's going to come to the right conclusion or the right ideas when she Googles it?
Right.
So you're going to be smart and not going to teach her because you don't want to confuse her. Now you just opened her up to the world of confusion. So they took the same argument and turned it on its head and said that nowadays, because information is so available to women, to anybody, any human, to say that you're not going to teach your daughter's Torah because you want to protect her is almost like it's almost foolhardy. You know, it's like it's cute, it's nice, but you're not doing your daughter any favors because she's going to find it on her own, and she's who knows what source is she going to learn from, and she'll get it from completely. So the same argument that was using it in the reverse. But only someone like the Rebbe can take that upon his shoulders because you have precedent of hundreds of centuries of this attitude, and takes it upon his shoulders to change it. It's not so simple.
I thought you weren't allowed to change precedent.
So the Rebbe can take it upon his shoulders.
Oh, that's what you mean by that.
That's right. So there's a sorry.
No.
There's a writer in England who I highly respect. He's a fantastic writer. I'm not going to mention his name, but he argues that the Rebbe did not mean to turn this around, but to expand the scope. Kind of what I was saying before, that you're allowed to teach women the laws, and you teach women the background of the laws. And therefore, if you teach them the background, the laws of Shabbos, that's tons of learning. And also, I should add, if a woman is obligated to love God and fear God, and love and fear of God is learned from Chassidus, and you have to teach your daughters Chassidus, right? So this person is arguing that the Rebbe is expanding what it means here if you're not allowed to teach your daughter's Torah. Because you can teach your daughter Torah, because even if you're not supposed to teach your daughter's Torah, we still maintain that you have to teach your daughters that which is relevant to them. And the Rebbe is coming to expand what's relevant to them. That's what this writer argues. But I'm not so convinced that's what the Rebbe actually meant. I'm pretty convinced the Rebbe meant open the doors to all learning, simply because if you don't, they will find they're going to learn anyway. And if you don't teach them and you don't guide them on how to learn, they're going to end up in a much worse position than you trying to protect them. That's how I understand the Rebbe's view. Exactly. So that's right. So if I'm saying only someone like the Rebbe broad enough shoulders to take it upon himself to say this.
The most popular comparison would be, let's say, as a parent, teach your children about, let's say, the birds and the bees.
Right, exactly. But nowadays, you're going to try to hide from them. You're just being foolhardy.
Yeah, right.
They're going to hit an iPhone when they're 11 and they're 13, and they're going to figure it out in a half a second. If you don't tell them, they'll get it from the worst source possible.
Right.
Precisely.
Oh, so it may be just the times, it required some tweaking.
Because of the
times.
because that's correct.
That's available now.
That's right. Because of
on
the
the internet.
that's right.
Which wasn't in
Yeah,
earlier
That's right.
eras.
That's right. Because of the top, that's exactly right.
I'm sure they wonder where babies come from. We're not gonna, either gonna find us come from a store or from, and like, hey.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
So again, it takes the Rebbe with very broad shoulders to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And the Rebbe said this in like late 80s, 90s. And if it's true, that's right. If it's true then that the Rebbe understood that women are going to find it out anyway, and you're being foolhardy by trying to protect them,
Right.
that is amplified by times 1,000 now
Yeah.
with the internet. So
Sure.
if you're not going to teach your daughters how to think like a Jew, and they're going to get that from somewhere else, and you're just undermining what you're trying to do.
Can I ask a question on from the male perspective?
Sure.
So when we're like we're saying, from the male perspective, the person should, like we're saying, we can learn, and it's not. But even within that, there is so much that
Yeah.
you can learn within that. So I'll just tell you, for example, like I was very curious, and when I was in my when I picked up the Steinsaltz version of Masechet Nida,
Okay.
and just curious, and the Hong Kong company, he says, "Hey, the Bachar learning Masechet Nida, it's not pasnish, it's not heard of." Okay, stay there.
I just verbring the berichten at the quickness. I'm not going
Really?
to say anything negative,
No,
but I might have a different view of that.
really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I don't know. I'll tell you this. But the Rebbe had it was in my story recently. The principal and some educators of Beis Yaakov, non-Chabad girls' school, came to the Rebbe. They had an audience, and it's actually published. Before I read it in my story, it's published in like the appendices to that year's talk. They published some of the Rebbe's transcripts of some of the Rebbe's audiences, and this is one of them. And the principals are asking Rebbe, how do we teach the parts of Torah to the girls that seem difficult to teach? Or stories of where intimacy is discussed. So what do you do? He never said, teach it exactly as it says. Because if the kid thinks that you're hiding something, that's just going to make the kid want to learn it more.
Right.
And then when you hide it and the kid learns it more, now the kid thinks of it as something bad, dirty that my teachers didn't want to tell me about. And now I'm going to sneak in and get it behind the scenes and, oh, look at me. As opposed to, this is part of life. This is part of Torah. We're learning it. And this is the way it is.
Right.
The less of a deal you make out of it, the more normal you make it sound. Yeah, Torah discusses every part of life, including this part of life.
Right.
Good. Now move to the next subject. So it becomes not normalized, but it becomes it doesn't become something that they quoted a pasuk, which is Mayim Gunov Mim Taku. It's a verse which says stolen waters are sweet. When you're told you can't get something, now you get it. It's like, ooh, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason to do that. You're putting a negative spin on something which is not negative.
But is it taboo in the Torah?
Not at all.
Okay.
Well, I mean, open the Gemara. The Gemara has no problem discussing everything and anything under the sun.
Yeah,
Literally.
absolutely.
I will go in 2 lines. We'll go from discussing women's body parts to discussing philosophy about God without a problem.
Right.
Because it's Torah,
Right.
and it's truth, and it's life. And that's the beginning and end of the story. Anyway,
I like it.
have a wonderful day, Eden.
Yeah.
And God willing, we still have some more social commentary from the Mishna coming tomorrow, which we can verbring about as well. Some statements from Rabbi Yeshua tomorrow. Okay, have a good day.
Yeah.